Can you show examples of weak squares in games? Have you ever wondered how certain squares on the chessboard can become weak and create opportunities for your opponent? Let's break down the concept of weak squares and see some real game examples. A weak square is a square that cannot be defended by a pawn. This makes it vulnerable to being occupied by an opponent's piece. These squares often appear in enemy territory where no pawn can protect them. For white, weak squares typically show up on the 3rd and 4th ranks. For black, they are often found on the 5th and 6th ranks. When a pawn structure is fixed or compromised, it can lead to weak squares. These squares are especially important for knights, which thrive on advanced squares that are well supported. Let's look at some examples. In an endgame scenario, imagine black has weak squares that white can infiltrate with the king. If white's king reaches these weak squares, it can penetrate black's position and potentially win the game. Conversely, if black has a strong pawn structure, like a pawn on f6 controlling e5 and g5, white's king cannot enter. This shows how changing pawn placement can affect which squares are weak. Now consider weak complexes of squares. After exchanging a fianchetto bishop, a group of dark squares such as f6, g7, and h6 can become weak. This cluster is vulnerable because no pawn can defend them. An opponent's piece on these squares can create strong pressure. In the middle game, think about a weak square like e5 for black. If white places a knight on e5, supported by rooks on the e-file, black's position can become very difficult. The knight on e5 controls key squares and restricts black's options. This occupation often leads to a lasting positional advantage. Identifying weak squares is essential for deciding where to place your pieces. Players often move knights or other pieces to these weak squares to create strong outposts. Controlling weak squares can limit the opponent's mobility and open up tactical chances. In endgames, weak squares can determine king activity and the outcome of the game. Recognizing and exploiting these squares can provide a significant edge. Examples from games include king infiltration through weak squares in endgames, knight outposts on squares like e5 in the middle game, and weak complexes created by pawn structure and piece exchanges. Understanding weak squares can greatly improve your chess strategy and tactics. By focusing on these concepts, you can enhance your overall game and become a more formidable opponent.